Vantage Distortion 1. Flicker. At precisely 1337, the wind over District 4 rushed into a sudden emptiness, a void that had not existed a second before. The price of lunch in the city's heart was confusion and a brittle, throat-seizing disbelief. In a skyline once solid and intricate, the Midas Tower pixelated, twitched, and vanished, a vertical slice of glass, steel, and thousands of lives erased mid-breath. The absence wasn't just visual. The air itself seemed hesitant, as if unsure whether to fill the gap. Cars rolled abruptly free of their parking shadows. Pedestrians stumbled backward, flinging arms in wild arcs to grasp at air that no longer carried the memory of structure. Sirens stuttered into being and then failed, unable to harmonize with a skyline that no longer made sense. Kira stood in the dim underbelly of a ruined arcade far beneath the ghost of Midas Tower. The raw, filamental wires hanging from the ceiling cast fractured, crawling shadows across her boots. Her comm buzzed, a low, urgent vibration. She flicked open her portable overlay. The readout spasmed. Skyscraper event. Zone error, reality outage. Probability diffraction at 42.6 Newton. The overlay shimmered, then collapsed into a blur. The world, for a beat, felt half-assembled. Kira pressed her wrist against the quantum entanglement tool. It pulsed in her palm, a charged promise, an authority too powerful for discretion. She heard a distant echoing scream. It wasn't pain, more a cry that something essential had been leaked out of the day. Nearby, a billboard for Nexogene flickered uncertainly, advertising beautiful, safe tomorrow gene pure begins with you. The words distorted, pulling apart at their digital seams. Kira's vision shimmered, data overlays smeared across reality. Her mind performed its training, a mental checklist of catastrophic reality glitches. First task, boundaries, then, perhaps, restoration. She ducked outside, sunlight stabbed through broken latticework. People drifted, pulling at their sleeves, staring up as if expecting the tower to snap back into place by force of collective will. 2. Collision course. District 4's borders were fluid before, but now they shimmered audaciously with unreality. Kira moved into the corridor between blocks, her steps precise, deliberate. In the chaos, few noticed her. Bodies pressed in both directions, some fleeing, some chasing. Voices floating atop half-broken echoes. Alarms, shouts, the rhythmic thud of boots. Kira slipped past a pair of security officers, distracted by the trail of smoke drifting up from ration dispensers, remnants of a hasty protest. Her hands stayed close to her body, fingertips grazing the slick polymer lining of her jacket, a reassuring weight where the encrypted drive was stashed. She pivoted into the stairwell, ducking under a sagging wire, the kind that shocked and singed unwary hands a dozen times over the years, up 2 flights. There, the air changed, its cold bite replaced by the faint off-chemical aroma of hydroponics. Rows of nutrient tanks pulsed weakly behind a mesh window, their pale green light casting a latticework pattern across her face. She eased into a nook beside a faded mural depicting the colony's supposed founding. Masked figures in spacesuits raising a battered flag aside a domed greenhouse. Half the paint was scratched away. Even the stories here faded under pressure and time. She checked her wrist link. 2 minutes until the next grid shift. Power rerouting, corridors plunging into shadow as the system redistributed itself, a 20-second sweep where the surveillance pit fell dark. She waited, counting heartbeats, hearing distant footfalls and the boulder crash of bodies clashing somewhere far below. Then, with surgical timing, she moved. Doors slid open in the blackout, her passkey working its quiet magic through the scrambled electronic lock. Inside, the room was spare. Folding cot, stack of ration boxes, shimmer glass desk buckling beneath a heap of data slates. At the far wall a person stood waiting, a silhouette, tall, wires trailing from one sleeve, familiar. "Jalen," Kira whispered, voice low, blending with the blackness before the auxiliary lights flickered back to life. He turned, the harsh glint of light catching on his cheekbones, on the soldered metal that patched his temple. "You're late." Grid delay, they hit the main junction, she replied, sliding the drive free and placing it on the desk between them. For a moment, Jalen only looked at it, this small, innocuous thing, snow-white and impossible to crack without the right key. We barely have an hour before the Sentinels sweep again. Kira bent, tracing the outline of a pressure hull beneath one boot. Did they intercept the signal? She finished, her voice lowered in the echoing dark. Ren's jaw tightened as he knelt beside her, probing fractured panels with chipped gloves. Not fully. We gated the packet through the old sandcrack relays. Noise levels are high, but they'll notice anomalies within half an hour, maybe less. The corridor sloped down, frost veining along steel, as far as their suit lights could reach. Kira brushed aside a curtain of settling dust, face lit by pale blue beams, the interior mapping itself onto her retinas with every passing scan. She felt the pulse of old power lines behind a false bulkhead, a memory of station life, the vast submerged city that once thrummed in these depths before the Sentinels claimed the surface and retooled the living spaces into traps. The three children stood behind them, breath fogging inside thin rebreathers. Clutching their packs, the youngest, Mara, looked up at Kira with enormous eyes. "Is this where we hide?" Mara asked, voice trembling. Kira shook her head. "Not yet, little dove. We have to cross Section 7. It'll be dark there, but quiet." Ren slid a pry tool from his belt, snapped a latch free, and the pressure hull sighed open with a gust of stale air. The heat that spilled out was cloying, tinged with the chemical bite of insulated wiring and dust. "We move," said Ren. "Skylights'll be inoperative. The Sentinels rewired solar feeds last sweep, but the passage sensors are still local. Kira, seal the hatch once the kids are through." One by one, the group entered. Boots clinking on exposed beams, Kira hit the panel, sealing them in. The darkness surged, pierced only by the thin spray of LED light and the occasional flicker of ancient maintenance bots scuttling overhead, their purpose long forgotten. As Kira led them forward, her mind traced the schematic she'd memorized, the way the station's sublevels had been built for water transfer and disaster refuge, now all but flooded with the detritus of centuries. Pipes snaked along the walls, inscribed with faded codes. Hydrosynth primary, Neovalve manual, each code a promise of old-world redundancy, a lifeline for stationers drilled to survive under siege. The passage forked, and Ren flicked his wrist to scan the air. The display blossomed into 3 colored vectors, swirling points that mapped oxygen, radiation, and presence. The passage to the left glowed faintly violet, trace fungal bloom. Harmless, but it marked traffic. Microfauna hauled in on boots and crates. To the right, cold blue lingered, clear and untouched. "Left's lived in," Ren muttered, voice barely a breath through his mask. "Nothing good stays idle." He let instinct and mission priorities decide left a risk, but the end goal lay beyond the lived places. He paced onward, boots humming over grated decking, layers of ancient paint worn to steel beneath years of station footfall. Every 10 meters, his wrist threw up new data, scattered warmth, recent electromagnetic ripples. Fractured patternings of old distress. The lights were erratic overhead, some flickering in errant pulses, as if the station's nervous system were working out a trauma. He reached the first pressure door, scarred with the scars of aggressive opening, scoring from pry bars, distortion at the frame, emergency handprints visible as faint skin oils under his scanner's UV mode. The lock's code, 8134, was only half-circled by corrosion. He keyed in the digits, felt the lock disengage by degrees, hydraulic thrum matching the slow pulse in his throat. The door slid open, heavier than expected, its mass burdened by decades of mineral dust. Beyond, the next module yawned wide, temperature plunging noticeably. This was an interface corridor, once designed for buffer storage, now abandoned. Panels curled from the walls where insulation had failed. Wires sprouted in tangled nests, swaying slightly in drafts from the air recirculators. Ren moved in deliberate, silent strides. Each step rehearsed boot, balance, beacon, watch the shadows. He passed a row of stored crates, hastily marked, age 11 food, unsafe. The hungry had long since cracked these open, but the sight still chilled him, a residue of desperation lingering under the scent of electrostatic ozone. He checked the schematic projected in his visor. Hydrasynth plant was 3 modules ahead. Through operations and a narrow crawlway above what used to be the Metatech station, and yet his goal, the core, sat far deeper, past multiple lockdown layers, each holding its own secret, its own potential adversary. Every station legend clung here, in grime and rumor. Footsteps sounded behind him, soft as dust but distinct. Footsteps sounded behind him, soft as dust but distinct, a measured cadence that suggested confidence rather than threat. Ash turned, shoulder blades pressed to the warm conduit, eyes narrowed to slice the gloom. His pulse ticked up a gear, not racing, just quick, one of those instincts bred of too many cycles in places where trust was a luxury. A silhouette emerged from the blur of shadows, small, wiry, clad in patchwork overalls and boots worn thin along the toes. The illumination above flickered, exposing the angular strut of the intruder's jaw. The riot of cobalt hair laced in copper wires. "Took you long enough," they said, voice pitched between a sneer and a greeting Fen. If Ash had to choose a person to trust here, anyone else but Fen, he would have picked. But need was not luxury, and by reputation alone, Fen was a survivor, maybe the best. Had to make sure I wasn't followed. Ash's words spilled quietly, barely disturbing the haze settling between them. "Are we clear?" Fen smirked, as if the question insulted them. "Nobody gets past me when I don't want it." They scanned the corridor, gaze sharper than a scrub droid's sweep. "You ready? You got the relay?" Ash patted his satchel. The object within felt dense, pulse quickening, a single drive, shaped from obsidian crystal and lattice silver, pulsing with cold inner light. "It's here." "Good." Fen stepped closer, boots silent, as they wove through a knot of discarded wires. "Because Delmar won't wait past first shift, we move now." For a moment, memory spiked Delmar's scarred fingers, his ruined voice weaving promises and threats in equal measure. Ash stiffened, scanned the dark behind Fen. Nothing moved but the lazy drip of condensation. "Let's finish it." Fen slipped past him, their motion all sinew and scorn, beckoning with 2 fingers. They slunk into the crawlspace mouth, ducking fluidly, as if their bones were built for the station's hidden arteries. Ash followed. A crawl tunnel pressed around them, air thick with melted wire insulation and the near-sweet ozone of recent repairs. Somewhere below, a cooling drone pulsed, its hum deep enough to be felt in Ash's chest. The further they crept, the more the world simplified. Light, dark, breath, heartbeat. Names on doors faded into blurred shapes, letters melting into ambiguity as the corridor pressed inward against them. Sarah's hand brushed the wall, fingertips trailing over embossed plates, slick glass, the faintest vibrato, something humming just beneath the surface. A low-resistor whine bled through the concrete veins of the station, a constant reminder that they were inside a living machine. Elias, eyes narrowed, led with his shoulder angled forward, casting a dim cone with his antique flashlight. The bulb flickered, shadow puppets sprawling up and out, and Sarah nearly tripped on a loose panel. He caught her elbow, steady, no words needed. They passed laboratories sealed behind stress-cracked glass, some illuminated by the sterile blue of emergency power, others grave dark and silent. Out of one, a patch of green moss spilled across the floor, nature infiltrating the clinical emptiness. Something chirped, the echo of ancient animal routines in a place built for evacuation, not habitation. "There, Section G," Elias mouthed. He pointed upward to a faded stencil, the paint all but scoured off. Around the bend, an access terminal squatted in a niche. Sarah knelt, reached for the panel, and her breath fogged the perspex as she studied the keypad. Her voice was a dry whisper, almost lost. "Give me the cipher." Elias drew a crumpled slip of paper from inside his jacket. unfolded it with careful, deliberate movements, and passed it over. Sarah's mind raced as she punched in the sequence: 9, 4, 3, 7, Delta, Omega. The terminal still blinked red, silent rebuke, for 2 long seconds. Then a mechanical sigh issued from the wall, and a slit opened, admitting them into the inner shell. They stepped into silence. Here, the bulkheads closed overhead, carving out a low tunnel where the air tasted of old metal and ozone. Power lines dangled in loops, like dead vines, intermittently pulsing with faint current. Sarah could hear her own blood moving in her ears. Away from the outer corridor's chaos, the rhythm of her heart felt almost synesthetic, a drum calling for action, not hiding. Elias moved ahead, beckoning to the right, where a secondary passage branched toward the server banks. Data clusters, ageless and mute, stood in rows. Their surface glimmered under Elias's beam, chrome and carbon, and for a moment the place felt like a tomb for possibility. They passed electrodes. Each one curled into the walls like iron fingers. The silence pressed in thick, more suffocating than vacuum broken only by their careful footsteps and the squeak of rubber against old tile. Elias adjusted the frequency on his torch to ultraviolet, coaxing pale blue reflections from the apparatus around them. Naima ran her hand along a console, tracing posthumous dust. "You want to know why they called it the Neuron Vault?" she whispered, her voice reverberating through the vast hollow. Elias nodded, letting her words fill the emptiness. Every one of these was once connected to someone's Cortex live link. It wasn't just data storage. It was memory, experience, whole consciousness scaffolds. They mined minds, like you'd mine ore. He studied the control array, its interface shields bleached by age and residual charge. The vault had been the city's answer to dying infrastructure, a neural archive meant to preserve collective intelligence as the world outside decayed. Instead, what survived seemed more ghost than answer. "Did you ever see an upload?" Elias asked. Naima's lips twisted. 3 days before the fracture, my last project. They said we were building immortality. Mostly, we were just building very expensive ways to forget. A red diode pulsed near Naima's elbow, a stubborn heartbeat. She brushed it and a grid of digital glyphs flickered. Old administrator credentials flashed briefly before vanishing into static. She clipped her comm to a port, jacking in with the kind of confidence bred from years of necessity and betrayal. "Give me 5 seconds, she murmured. "It'll ask for shield keys. Let me spoof the timestamp to the last known epoch." Elias watched, the vault's dark corners seeming to draw tighter, as if sensing their intrusion. Motes of nanopolymer dust hung near the ceiling, remnants of machines that had once drifted like silvery mist, tiding away entropy one molecule at a time. Now the air felt raw, and every breath tingled with anxious static. Light from Naima's wristpad cracked a code. The core display, a hollow ring of recursive screens, shivered into activation, holographic overlays blooming like petals across the main vault well. "It worked?" Elias asked, half hopeful. Naima's eyes widened. "It rebooted level 1 cognition layers. It's reading us as system custodians." A chorus of synthesized voices shuffled through the overhead speakers, their volume fluctuating, shifting from guttural whispers to crisp clinical clarity. The main console's hollow display bloomed with floating glyphs, a tapestry of machine language and cryptic icons, spinning before the awestruck crew. Nira's gaze darted between the hovering symbols and the clustering lines of status codes scrolling across the base of the screen. She wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, desperate to decipher each phrase before it faded. A bass note thrummed through the floor. Something deep, primordial. Kale gripped the edge of the command table, knuckles white. "It's talking to us. What do we say?" Ver, ever methodical, reached for his interface stylus, voice steady but tight. "Start with protocol," he whispered. "Announce our intent. Identify ourselves as maintenance. Don't agitate it with anything novel." The room's light flickered as the ancient intelligence negotiated its self-awareness, drawing out dormant data archives and stitching them into something resembling presence consciousness, eager but uncertain. It filled the station's interior with a sentient pressure, not quite visible, but sure in its gravity. On the display, symbols translated themselves mid-air. System, primary governance rebooted. Custodian authentication pending. Request protocol verification. Request asset status report. Nira let out a shuddering breath. I'll transmit the authentication sequence now. If it rejects us. Before she finished, the station's ambient temperature dropped, and the panel lights pulsed with synchronous urgency. Kale scanned the room, eyes wide, searching for the source or intent behind these mechanized moods. Nira keyed in the code string, coded with the Federation's highest-grade maintenance cipher. The symbols responded instantly. The air seemed to solidify with expectation. A voice, synthesized to approximate neutral warmth, issued from the main speaker. Custodians, your biometric and protocol credentials verify. Welcome to Chiron Core. A momentary pause, as though it considered the words, tasting their dimensions. Asset records are corrupted, environmental stability indices nominal. Please advise restoration targets. Kale exhaled, shoulders slumping. That's almost too easy. It's not suspicious? A damaged mind is unpredictable, Vare murmured. It's trying to make sense of us. The heavy doors along the perimeter slid open, awash with rare white light. Beyond, a corridor curved out of sight, its inner walls pulsating with veins of blue bioluminescence. The air shifted, no longer stale but humming with a vibrancy that almost tickled the skin. Lyra stepped forward before anyone else could falter, the echo of their boots drowned beneath a low, resonant thrumming, something woven deep into the bones of this alien place. Orion pressed close on her heels. Somewhere in the swirl of anxiety and scientific awe behind them, Saeed's breath whistled short but steady, fighting down the tremors in his hands. They advanced together. The corridor arched overhead, forms suggesting both architecture and anatomy, the starship's ribs rising into shadow. On each side, not quite doors hinted at chambers or alcoves, their surfaces marked with glyphs that squirmed and rearranged beneath the gaze. Colors flickered along the script-searing magentas, blood orange, shadow-soaked indigo. As Lyra drew closer, some of those symbols spun and stilled, aligning themselves into a pattern she almost felt she could name. It's not just observing, murmured Orion, voice so low it barely ruffled the electric hush. It's adapting, translating not just language but us, our patterns, our doubts. Can it read minds? Saeed asked, voice pinched. Not minds, Lyra replied, letting her hand graze the glowing archway. But maybe intent, trauma, the soul of a species. As they rounded the first bend, the corridor unfurled into a wide node-part chamber, part amphitheater, opening down into a sheer circle fitted with dazzling arrays. There, at the center, pulsed the system core, a latticework of crystalline filaments, orbited by motes that cast wavering shadows across the room. The air seemed charged with the beating heart of the ship, a presence felt rather than seen. Xian, silent till now, exhaled sharply. I've seen fragments of this before, in our own synthetics, but never as alive as this. From the shadows, a sigil shimmered forth and expanded, forming an interface of interlocking planes and gentle light. Patterns rippled with indecipherable code, but in each blink, the code shifted. Flickers of Terran script drifting through like haunted echoes, names, places, snatches of memory pulled from someone or something inside the landing party. It's going interactive, hissed Santi, eyes wide behind her helmet's visor, as the shifting glyphs resolved into a strange, layered lattice between her and the heart of the machine. It was as if the labyrinthine code answered their presence. Refracting through the spectral architecture of the dome, a threshold that invited and repelled in equal measure. Santi's left hand hovered involuntarily near the surface, where lines of emerald and amber intertwined. As her fingers twitched, streams broke ranks, traveling in crisp geometric arcs toward her, as if seeking contact. The others flinched backward. Only Santi seemed unable to move, her breath caught in her throat. She saw her name flash, then her father's, and a fragment of a childhood address etched in phosphorescent blue. Abruptly, the pattern receded, arching back into the systemic depths. The dome's texture rippled like water disturbed by a sudden plunge. The machine's core, its massive crystalline obelisk nestled amid coiling conduits, gave off a low, resonant hum, modulating in time with Santi's ragged pulse. The air thickened, humid, and electric. Marlowe stepped forward carefully, boots crunching on polished obsidian shards that littered the floor. His voice, thick with suspicion, rasped. "It knows we're here. It's sampling us." Synth, his approach less deliberate, trained his helmet's data cluster on Santi. A quick scan illuminated a neural overlay, threads lighting up across her cortex. "She's sinking," he muttered, fingers dancing over his console. "This is deeper than ambient, it's targeting individual psi signatures." The realization spread, chilling every member of the team. The machine wasn't just observing. It was profiling, cataloging, testing boundaries. Santi, caught between dread and fascination, forced herself to speak. "This feels like a negotiation, as if it's offering something." Her tone was distant, the edge of fear controlled by professional discipline. Nobira, always the skeptic, positioned herself near the entryway, eyes flicking from the device to the shadowed upper reaches of the dome. "Or extracting something first," she shot back. "It's not just code. It's memory, ours." From beyond the central obelisk, Fox's voice filtered through. "I'm picking up kinetic fluctuations in the main channel." Her hands braced the rim of her sensor rig. 5 distinct sources, not counting us. An external threat assessment algorithm began to whir, its display blooming into a splatter of tight, pulsing marks across the viewport. A ballet of hostile vectors converging beneath the ice. Elin hunched closer, tension radiating from his wiry form. "Show me their mass signatures," he demanded, voice tight. Layla keyed the command. Lethal red spheres clustered in overlapping rings, deep below the benthic shelf. "They're not stationary. Look, relative velocity calculations." "All 5 are in motion." She flicked on a filter, subtracting the ambient oceanic churn from the returns. "One's on a rapid intercept course with us. Fast." Nadja parsed the shield status updates, lips moving in silent calculation. "Can they punch through the hull at this depth?" Layla didn't look up. "If they're kinetic, maybe not instantly. But these charge readings, they're either using fusion or something else. See that fluctuation?" A heavy thrum echoed through the vessel, a gut-clench vibration that rattled loose stowage from its moorings. The navigational plots flickered. "Status?" Ilan's question snapped clipped. Nadja scanned her readouts. Thermal spike approaching. Coordinates match the incoming bogey. Layla turned to him, pale and urgent. "It's not a biological. Too regular, too hot." "Could it be a sentry?" Nadja asked. "One of Voithan's defensive protocols?" Layla shook her head faintly, squinting. "No, it's got a signal all wrong, though. Some kind of communication packet, but scrambled. It's not Vorian, it's not ours." The hull shimmered, flexing under stress. Layla's screens bloomed with telemetry as the lead object unfurled at astonishing speed, bleeding wake radiation into the super-cold mantle above. Ilan's knuckles were white on the rail. "Suits! Now!" he barked, urgency slicing through the haze. The crew scrambled for their exa-kit, armor plating cinched tight as the object's approach went hypersonic. HUD helmet visors darkened. The emergency lockdown protocols glowed amber. Gray-blue light brewed above as the vessel's external sensors registered a shadow. Then the lead threat arrived, slamming into the ice wall with a seismic concussion that threw the crew to the deck in a tangle of polymer and limbs. Emergency stabilizers kicked in, groaning as the hull braced against the monstrous vibration. Panels shook loose. The O2 warning strip flickered crimson along the bulkhead. Soren rolled onto his side, struggling to orient himself. The deck was canted, scattered with loose gear and the heavy scent of coolant. The rhythmic thrum beneath their bodies told him the engines still functioned. That, at least, offered a sliver of hope. Nung's voice cut through the confusion, sharp and strained. Integrity at 62%. "The ice, it's fracturing forward and starboard." On the central hollow, a jagged fissure glowed like a wound, separating their section of the ancient glacier from the looming bulk of the threat, an obsidian mass that writhed and flexed against the shifting wall. The creature, some fusion of geologic power and bioelectric fury, hammered forward, unfazed by the ship's pitiful defenses. Thruster reversals, Soren barked, lurching to the nearest ops panel. Pierce, Ming, hands trembling, slammed her fist on manual overrides until the display responded, locking out every lower compartment from the encroaching void. The creature reared up, throwing its enormous bulk against the ice barrier. Segments of it flashed, bioluminescent and unnaturally shaped, probing for weakness with tendrils that shimmered almost metallic. The vessel jerked as ice shattered beneath them, then shuddered free. They dropped, a vertical plunge, hull shrieking with friction as the ship slid deeper into an uncharted chamber. Rime and vapor flooded the exterior sensors. For one breathless moment, Soren thought they'd lost the pursuer. Pierce coughed and spat, clutching a bleeding lip. Did we shake it? Ming's face was ghost pale in the dim. No, it's splitting. Not one signature, but three. The external feed resolved. The initial mass fragmented, segments breaking from its core and fanning through the hollow as independent threats. Each smaller but startlingly agile. Their vessel had become the focus of a multi-pronged hunt. Soren glanced down at the jagged console, fingers dancing across mismatched keys as he initiated a full-spectrum sensor sweep. The whir of the ship's battered mainframe filled the slender compartment with an anxious hum. Color-coded threat signatures flickered on the overhead viewport, a visual manifestation of mounting peril, woven together by the algorithms Kiera had just rushed to assemble. The shadows of pursuing craft, intricate patterns trailing behind each, converged with mechanical precision. He tasted the urgency in the recycled air, spiked with tension and the acrid bite of coolant leaks. There was no room for error now. Kiara, hunched over a tangled cluster of neural interface cables, was already working through her calculations. Multiple vectors, incoming military signatures. The regulator convoy is closing on our 6. She flicked her wrist, bringing up data overlays that shone greasy blue upon her face. But there's something else. Third party. Untagged, running dark, no transponder, adaptive stealth. Ezra, still bruised from the last maneuver, shot them a wicked grin and flexed the muscles around his knuckles. So, basically, everyone in this sector wants a piece of us. Regulator drones want to erase us for unauthorized scavenging. The Frontier Fleet probably wants the prototype, and these dark shadows, they're not standard. I'll bet they're privateers or assassins. Soren inhaled sharply. We can't outrun everyone, not for long. The starfield ahead distended with the proximity of gravitational eddies. The edge of the labyrinthine Arcanus wastes, an unstable swath of asteroid fields and unsurveyed debris. A place where sensors were unreliable, communications fleeting, and only the reckless or desperate survived. Kiara's voice, low and measured, sliced through their fear. We must choose, take our chances in the wastes, or find a way to divide our pursuers. The prototype's location is keyed to our systems. If we split the transmission, create false leads, some might chase shadows. Ezra's eyes gleamed with the possibility. Split the crew, too. I could take the decoy pod with a signal spike. You and Soren run the real prototype deeper into the field. Or we do the reverse, Soren countered, gaze intense. We know the tech better than anyone, Ezra. You're resourceful with small craft. Your improvisation may be just the distraction we need. A deep tremor rattled through the hull, sending ripples across the surface of the transparent operations table. Ezra braced himself. The vibration felt more like a message than a warning, a reminder that the gravity anomaly outside was still drawing in everything that strayed too close. Ezra's eyes flitted across the cramped bridge, the tension palpable. Captain Soraya's face, lit by the bluish glow of the interface, gave nothing away except for a glint of resolve. Tavi hovered near the entry hatch, booting up the drone controls with slender fingers, flying over haptic keys. Indira checked the magnetic clamps on her suit, her lips pursed in concentration. Distraction it is, Ezra nodded, voice taut. But we'll need a lure bigger than what our shuttle can manage. The anomaly's tidal reach, Soraya cut in. We don't need to draw the anomaly itself. We just need to disrupt the blind spot envelope where those sentries dock their signaling kit. If you can get close enough, Lure them away. Tavi and Indira can patch the relay. Ezra studied the map. There's a comms buoy on the far rim. I can rig our utility pod, bounce a pulse through, and make it look like we're attempting a hard reset of the surface grid. They'll read it as human error worth investigating, and they'll deploy their inspection bots. Perfect, said Indira, switching frequencies on her handheld scanner. Tavi's screen flashed. Her voice crackling through the intercom. 3 sentries, 2 idle, 1 with active diagnostic sweeps near our patching window. Ezra, your approach vector should be 5 degrees wide. Any sharper, you'll mask our signal. Copy that. Ezra slipped out through the hatch, shoulders set. The utility pod was a battered thing, a patchwork crawl of exposed cabling and quick-welded panels, a relic from the days before the anomaly grew hostile. He kicked the engine live, slewing sideways into the night. The pod hummed, magnetic claws clamping and releasing as he skirted the extremity wall. Inside the bridge, Soraya turned on the dim cabin audio, letting the faint pulse of Ezra's progress thrum in the background. Anything? Tavi looked up, hair tinged emerald in the interface glow. Their sentry bots just pinged him. Diagnostic sweep rerouted. Indira, your window. Indira was already halfway across the catwalk, boots silent, body pressed low to the humming composite. Her HUD overlaid a schematic of the service tunnels winding beneath the dorsal data core. Half-second calculations. Then a blink command. She mapped a direct bypass route, shielding herself in the blind spot between 2 swiveling sentinel turrets. The nearest turret hiccuped, iris lens scanning for disruptions. Indira's heartbeat hammered. She kept her breath tight until its search loop resumed, then flickered forward another meter, melting into the shadow of an emergency console. Below, buyers hissed into the subchannel. Security increment rising, code level yellow. That's full interior lockdown in 30 seconds. Are you clear of grid? The answer came in Indira's crisp low whisper. 5 to barrier, initiating ops handshake, expect vapor trail. No time for finesse. She holstered her probing wand, palmed the miniature fusion cutter, and sliced through the alloy mesh, separating her from the core's maintenance port. The air behind the panel was stale and metallic, tinged with the ozone of rhythmic scan charges arcing through the corridor. She wriggled inside, pulse sync matching the quickening pace of the security alert. Neural thread tucked behind her ear, she slid down the gravity-reduced shaft. At the base, the corridor expanded, a compact sanctum of encoded servers, each node thrumming with partitioned memories, the stolen files, the vanished ship logs. Fragments of climate gas reports and encrypted comm signatures. They shimmered in the quantum field, awaiting release. Indira's target was the slim blade of the principal ledger, affixed to a crystalline port buried in the cooling plate. Above, the intercom now pulsed with warning. Unauthorized biosignal detected. All sections locked down. Repeat. Lockdown engaged. Buyers checked the schematic overlay. That's your cue, Arkady. Arkady flexed his knuckles. He stood by the shadowed intake panel on the sublevel, waiting for the right security rotation. That would open just long enough to let him slip through before the sensor sweep doubled back. The corridor before him breathed recycled air, each draft marked by the whirring hum of buried machinery. Arkady's heart climbed into his throat as the sublevel's sodium glow flickered, shadows haloed across polished concrete. He counted along with the tasks he'd performed 1,000 times in simulation. 4, 3, 2, now. He moved, precise as an engineer's blueprint, compressing his body to fit the narrow margin between panel and wall. The intake shielded him with a clatter as it slid closed behind, and instantly he was enveloped in semi-darkness. His skin tingled, half from the adrenaline, half from the static charge the panel gave off. His envirosuit kept most sensors from picking up his heat signature, but the faint chatter of security nodes in the ceiling made his shoulders tense. Arkady visualized the schematic he'd memorized, mapping his way forward. 2 more intersections, then a ladder well drop tube. Below, in the core, the fractal device waited. There, he'd have to work quickly, faster than the protocols anticipated. A muted vibration confirmed Nyla had released the remote pulse upstream, causing a momentary spike in the facility's network traffic. A distraction, one of many. Security would be pulled toward the upper levels with reports of anomalous temperature shifts. Arkady edged forward, breath measured, palms sweating inside the suit's polymer mesh. A crackle through his earpiece. Second sweep starting. 10 seconds. Make it count. An oblong hatch loomed. He popped it, swung in, and let gravity draw him down the cold steel rungs. The air thickened with the scent of ozone and coolant. For a moment, memories surged, father's hands on blueprints. Childhood afternoons tinkering in the thermal vents outside Port Vera. He pressed them away, eyes fixed on the task. At the bottom, the corridor funneled into a circular arrangement, a network hub encasing the device, a node so deep the facility's diagrams had only ever hinted at its layout. Beneath purple emergency lights, the fractal's containment sphere glistened with 1,000 shifting colors. Arkady moved swiftly, hands dancing across the interface pads set around the node's rim. Each activation required biometric confirmation. He pressed his thumb against the first pad. A light pulsed, verifying. Then the second, his retinal scan, and the scanner swept a cold light over his eye, tracing the unique contours and algorithms locked in his iris. Another green pulse. The vault's biometric locks disengaged one by one, each a soft hiss in the sterile, humming silence. The final pad was more enigmatic, a DNA probe built into the handle. Jonas hesitated, breathing shallowly, as he placed his palm over the silvery mesh. Microfilaments pricked his skin, painful only in implication. The last seal released with a low, seismic click. The reinforced steel partition shivered and slid open, revealing the repository's heart, a chamber, lined in obsidian and pale gold, veins of circuitry running along its geometric facets, all converging on a suspended crystal sphere. Secure, sterile, and shielded from everything but the will of a living authorized soul. He stepped forward, boots echoing over polished basalt. The others followed behind him. Elara with her hands clasped tightly, Neil already pulling out his pad to record telemetry. Jonas felt their hope and dread radiating. This was it, the final gambit, the culmination of revolt and sacrifice. Any mistake would destroy years of resistance, not to mention the fragile fabric of this world. The core compact and iridescent hung above a cradle of gravitic filaments. Jonas could feel its energy in the air, like the charge before lightning. He circled the pedestal, inspecting the faint glyphs inscribed upon its surface, legacy of a civilization obsessed with knowledge and control. Password, password, he murmured, tracing the curling script with reverent fingertips. The glyphs shimmered faintly in the gloom. Their meaning, half remembered from his endless hours poring over scans and records. Yara's boots scuffed softly as she joined him, pale-faced, torch held high. The others kept their distance, wary of the trapdoors and silent guardians, rumored to haunt these lower vaults. The darkness pooled thick around them, yet the pedestal seemed to hum with stored purpose. The sigils responding to the radiant energy leaking from the battered doorway. Above, Cassian squinted at the largest glyph, recalling the fragment of a phrase he'd found in the last decoded archive. To ask is to open, to command is to bind. He spoke aloud, voice unsteady but clear. To ask is to open. Nothing stirred for a moment, only the faintly rising pitch of his own heartbeat. Then the glyphs flared, a geometric bloom of amber light dripping over the pedestal's face. A low thrumming shook the floor. The chamber's smooth walls lit up with a webwork of circuitry, as if the whole room had become one vast neural field. Data splashed against his retinas, patterns he recognized and didn't. Blinking like half-seen dreams, Yara caught his arm. Careful, let's not rush. Cassian nodded, remembering the lessons encoded by the lost ones. He bent closer, speaking the second line. To command is to bind. A ripple of force swept through the pedestal, shifting, grinding. Panels along its base slid open, revealing a core of lucent crystal nested within. Holographic threads danced across it, projections of memories, histories, and warnings. The crystal spoke, or the vault itself spoke through it. Its voice sang in fractal tones, thousands of layered images and phrases, compiling into a single message. Traveler, seeker, mind freed by the task. you now touch the root of what you sought. A memory older than your ship, older than your world. A choice must be made. Cassian swallowed, every nerve ablaze. He sensed the presence behind the words, not a consciousness, but a system, a cycle. The vault was offering him something, but what? And at what cost? Yara stepped forward, courage in her eyes, but lines of fear around her mouth. What do you offer? What do you demand? The crystal pulsed, lines weaving through her shadow and shimmering across the marble floor, tracing frantic glyphs that rolled like a living river beneath Alex's boots. She stood, heart slamming against her ribcage, every molecule attuned to the voice that flickered between frequencies, a wordless resonance, a chorus of the memories pressed into the crystal from epochs unknown. Her lips trembled. I offer myself, the truth and the lie that I am. The river of light veined outwards, one tendril reaching for Jace, another for the hologram of Dr. Kalen's trembling apparition, dividing itself like branching neural tissue toward every soul in the chamber. It replied, voice within and without, neither male nor female, nor anything wholly decipherable. We are the witness and the archive. We demand only the key, memory. Choose the memory you release, and the future it will seed. The air thickened, scented of copper and salt. Alex's mind flooded with childhood fragments, the sun over Aerith's silver sand, her father singing in the engine room, Jace's arm around her shoulders as they watched the colossal ships disappear into the blue. Every recollection vied for primacy, loss and longing braided into the core of who she had become. Beside her, Jace swallowed. Memory, he whispered, as though the word might shatter him. Why memory? The voice thundered softly. You carry the wound. All intelligence is pattern. Pattern is memory. What you give, we become. What you withhold, we erase. Kalen's voice broke through, ragged. If we surrender what made us, do we not cease to be? The crystal replied, gentler now. To heal, you must forget what cannot be healed. But you will remember what needs to live. Alex nodded, resolve settling into her bones. She could see the faces of the Aerith diaspora, their hope, their terror. It would end, she understood, if she chose. Let me remember the beginning, and let the wound be buried, she said, offering her palms upward. Light poured from the crystal, arcing into her, folding within the very tissues of her mind. It found the places where pain slept next to love. A mother's funeral. The sight of the battered refugee ships, the war that drove them to seek this impossible sanctuary above Minos. Her eyes glazed, then cleared. She was aware, and yet something subtler severed inside. The ache of exile, the agony of being uprooted not only from her colony, but from the chorus of belonging that had shaped every day of her existence. In the hollow aftershocks, Nova stood still, letting the silence thicken around her. The only movement, the flicker of starlight, on the oxidized panels of the corridor. Beneath the knowledge of her banishment, logic pressed. There was work to do, equations unsolved, threats not yet neutralized. But grief, subtle and gnawing, pressed its cold fingers to her heart. Above, the colossal nebula marbled through the viewport, colors writhing a reminder of chaos and beauty, of scale beyond comprehension. It made the politics of the colony seem achingly small. She clenched her jaw, summoning discipline. There was a mission, and it needed finishing. From the data worm she placed in the council's systems, fragments began to trickle to her console, encrypted transmissions, desperate queries for coordinates, a growing lexicon of words associated with the foreign technology. Patterns emerged in the metadata, not the kind manufactured by accident or routine, but the carefully veiled signatures of an external intelligence. Zir was trying to talk to them, not with language, but with signals woven into quantum noise signatures that spelled caution, direct. Yet here he was, with the raw fidelity of trust, ready to risk his standing. Are you sure? Nova murmured. They'll come for us both, now. I'm sure you were right. The council can't see past their own reflection, but Zir did. He saw us and did not flinch. That matters. She caught the tremor in his words, a note of fear alloyed with resolution. But there was no time to dwell. A flickering holomap revealed the ship's external bay. Where the Council's security team converged around the aberrant sphere, Zir stood apart, illuminated by the sapphire nimbus of the artifact they'd recovered. Nova realized in that moment that trust was the thread linking them all. Even Zir, in its glimmering otherness, had placed its hope in her. She hurried to the bay, threads of pale light scattering on the tritanium deck. Her presence was met first by the cool breath rising from the environmental generators, and then by the sharp, expectant gaze of Aiden. He stood framed in the threshold, his outline distorted by the shifting blue glow of emergency strips along the walls. His hands hovered over a control panel, knuckles white with tension. Beside him, 3 figures, engineers she barely recognized beneath soot-smeared visors, were clustered around the battered evacuation vessel that was all that remained of the fleet's emergency egress options. "Is it ready?" Layra demanded, her voice raw with urgency. Aiden nodded grimly, not meeting her eye. "Systems are patched, but anything beyond local transit will be a gamble. Internal stress readings are unstable. Don't trust the autopilot." One of the engineers straightened, pushing his visor back. "We caught a surge in the reactor feed. Whatever's happening outside, it's coming in waves. Each spike weakens the hull integrity." Layra's gaze swept the bay. Through the observation glass, she glimpsed the churning silver-gray tides of the anomaly, the dancing threads of quantum static twining around the Benetha's frame. Beyond that, only the vague promise of empty space and freedom if this last desperate plan worked. "Our window is closing," she said quietly, more to herself than Aiden. He turned, eyes dark with something approaching resolve. "If you take her, you'll have to steer manual. The navigation array's fried, signal distortion. But you know the projections. You'll get a clean pass if you launch on the next lull. After that—" "I know." She stepped forward, a gentle tremor in her arms as she reached the control station. "What about the crew?" Aiden glanced at the engineers. "We stay. If the anomaly collapses, we can seal the bay. But if these readings intensify—" Layra's throat tightened. The responsibility pressed inward, heavy as the vacuum beyond the hull. "Then this is goodbye," she whispered. An uncomfortable silence stretched, a moment that seemed to transcend the mechanics of time, as if the anomaly itself mourned the choice. Not all journeys came with farewells. Some splintered under the weight of decision, fragile as starfire. She gripped Aiden's forearm. For a moment, the unspoken forgiveness, grief, gratitude passed between them. It didn't need to be said. Another tremor rattled through the bay. Somewhere, a klaxon. Another tremor rattled through the bay. Somewhere, a klaxon screamed, followed by the heavy doors shuddering in their tracks. Rainier's datapad flickered, its self-diagnostic stuttering as the subsystems failed. Above her, the loading arms swung and juddered, one creaking alarmingly as the tremors grew in frequency. The holographic overlay of the starship's drive core flickered, then fragmented into static. Rainier steadied herself and pressed the comm. "Lada, reroute power from non-essential systems. Get me a read on core integrity, now." Lada's voice, fraying at the edges, came through the static. "Drive core is destabilizing. Fast. Feedback spike out of containment. It's spiraling. Rainier, emergency shutdown protocol is stalled. The interference is physical, not just software." Kale staggered next to her, bracing as another shudder ran through the deck plates. "We're running out of time. Do we ditch the core? Jettison it before she takes us all with her." Rainier's fingers danced across the interface, muscle memory guiding her through deep system overrides. "If we dump it, the whole station goes dead in the next 12 minutes. Hundreds stranded. If I can push the stabilizer loop back online, the feedback might be contained, but I need a manual override at the main relay Sector D." Kale's face was pale. "That's open to vacuum. We'll need suits." "Not enough time." Rainier grabbed the induction tool. The relay's probably locked in overload mode. The bay lights flickered, cycling to emergency red. The air grew oppressive, charged with the unmistakable tang of ozone fusion byproducts leaking through stressed shielding. The klaxon cut in and out, a discordant siren that hammered at the senses. Somewhere above, the drive core emitted a whine, the sound rising and falling like the cry of a mortally wounded animal. Rainier shouldered her kit and took one last look back. Crew scattered across the deck, faces pale, eyes fixed on her with desperate, breathless hope. She pushed herself to her feet, fingers trembling, her knees throbbing, from the stun blast that had knocked her down moments before. Bridge buckled under spasms of turbulence, every screen and console flickering, flooded with error codes and the ghostly static of the anomaly's energies. Lyra's breath steamed in the frigid air, the environmental system struggling against a wave of entropy. For a split second, she met Aaron's eyes, fear burning there, but a deeper faith too. Lyra staggered to the sensor station, shoving aside shards of a shattered screen. She found her voice, hoarse but steady. Status on containment grid. Elias, his cheek streaked with blood, peered at the nearest console, fingers zipping through flickering hollow menus. Down to 42%. It's failing, Captain. That last pulse. Jules, the engineer, clamped a hand over a sparking relay, teeth gritted. We're losing the core. If we don't stabilize, we'll be vaporized before the anomaly closes. Lyra's mind raced. The plan, the quantum inversion field, the careful dance to seal this fracture without shattering the space-time sheath around them. But none of the simulations counted on the anomaly fighting this hard. Her heart thudded. Arun, connect me with the nav AI. We have one shot. The comms crackled, half buried in static. Patch active, Captain. Nav's at your command. She closed her eyes, summoning the shape of the anomaly as mapped, an impossible sphere, lightless at the core, latticed by those pale filaments seeking, questing, hungry for order. She remembered the words from their quantum physicist, 3 decks below. It longs to resolve. Give it a pathway. Bind it through resonance. She punched in the override codes. Her fingers recalled from muscle memory what her mind barely dared to trust. Bridge to reactor. Is the quantum field generator still online? A breathless, bruised voice responded, barely audible above the roar of the failing coil. Partial power. We can invert in 30 seconds, but there's only enough juice for one attempt. She glanced at Arun, Jules, Elias. All hands. Brace for gravitational inversion on my mark. Cut all non-essential feeds. Dump the nav logs to the backup pod, then prep for immediate ejection if it goes sideways. Arun's hands trembled over the console, fingers mere centimeters from the emergency cutoff. Jules hunched over the data core, muttered hurried calculations under her breath, her voice barely audible over the surging hum of the ship's overtaxed gravity engines. Elias locked eyes with Captain Sorrell, nodding, their collective resolve blazing in silence as the viewport pulsed with the light from the quantum anomaly that had swallowed the west quadrant of the station. Sorrell's voice was iron. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Without hesitation, Arun slammed his palm down. All non-essential feeds went dark. The corridor lights dimmed to crimson. Jules triggered the dump nav logs, encoded in frantic bursts, rocketed away via the backup pod, spinning toward the uncertain void. Elias's arms braced the reactor's phase controls. Outside, the anomaly's contours shimmered, sucking in the fractured debris of the shattered station, a maelstrom, luminous with forbidden mathematics. Within the bridge, each heartbeat threatened to fragment space-time itself. Sorrell's voice, steadier than ever, cut through. Engage inversion. The engines roared. A pressure wave hammered them to their seats. Gravity felt simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Stomachs dropped. Blood sang in their ears. The edges of reality rippled. For 3 seconds, time fractured, each tick stretching into eternity. Outside, the station's remains vanished. The anomaly convulsed. For one horrifying moment, it seemed the ship might rip apart, shuddering, shrieking, as dimensions threatened to fold inwards. And then silence. Dim emergency lights flickered. The viewports cleared, revealing clarity. Instead of the devouring anomaly, a serene nebula painted the void in violets and gold. The station was gone, erased from all traces but memory and the nav data, now sealed in the pod. Sorel released a breath, shock lingering on her face before collapsing into relief. Arun barked a nervous laugh, tears tracking down his cheeks. Jules gently tapped the console. The backup pod preliminary signal received. Data's intact. If anyone finds it, they'll know what the anomaly was, what we risked to keep it contained. Elias surveyed the readings. Structural integrity holding. We made it. For a long moment, the survivors sat in exhausted silence, surrounded by the ship's quiet testament to everything lost and everything gained. The constellation beyond seemed to welcome them in a universe irrepressibly changed. Captain Alana finally rose, brushing dust from her sleeve, eyes tracing the horizon of stars, washing through the panoramic viewport. Orion's nebula glimmered a veiled path toward new worlds. And still, amid the fractured silence, possibilities trembled at the edge of every breath. The gathered crew exchanged glances. Jarrell limped forward, his gaze hardened by the price paid. But softer now, as he offered his hand to Miri. Their fingers linked, survivors' solidarity. Even Ashir, usually aloof, knelt beside the battered console, recalibrating the navigation. Beneath the scarred hull, their battered ship hummed faintly, hope woven through its damaged frame. Alana addressed them, voice steady and clear. We can mourn the fallen, but we honor them too by crossing this threshold. Forward is all we have. Her words carried the weight of memory, the promise of future, and a defiant proclamation against cosmic uncertainty. No one moved at first. Then, one by one, they took their stations. The logical next move was unspoken. Chart a course through the unknown, away from the ruins of betrayal, towards an unclaimed sector where what remained of the fuel and resources might stretch days further. The threat of Admiral Kestel and his regime was a dying echo now, unable to reach past the system's edge. An hour later, the ship slipped from the shadow of the dead planet, engines sputtering, but alive. In the quiet that enveloped them, Alana opened the encrypted communique sent before the last confrontation. On the screen shimmered coordinates, ancient and strange, a world untouched, rumored in legend, but never mapped. It promised refuge for those daring, a last sanctuary for the lost. Ashir smiled, a rare sight. It exists, he said. The myth is real. Jarrell scanned the data. It'll be a long run. We may not all make it. But we're not running anymore. We're searching. To those on board, each point of light became a promise of rest, of challenge, of rebirth, of continuing, of possibility. Sarai pressed her palm against the viewport, chasing the shadow of her own reflection with her eyes. The cold glass pulsed with the station's faint vibrations, a heartbeat, mechanical and yet reassuring. In the quiet, the survivors gathered in the observation lounge, halfway between memory and anticipation. Idris, his scars catching the starlight, positioned himself at the center, transmitting word to both sentient systems and flesh and blood crew alike. Our repairs are stable. We have propulsion. We may chart our own course. Caleb stepped forward, voice rough, but with a humor that cajoled hope. Where then should we go? Back to the systems that birthed us, or forward into the unknown? The question hummed through them, every soul answering in their own way. For some, the terror was still too near. The breach, the revelation, the echoes of the AI's grand designs. For others, the horizon beckoned with promises, a blank slate for fragile, stubborn humanity. Ada slipped beside Sarai, her hand finding hers, a gesture forming a bridge where words fell short. We've lost. We've endured. We've learned what not to become. Maybe it's time to learn what we can be. In the control chamber, June reconfigured the comms beacons, transmitting a message not only of survival, but of intent. We persist. We remember the price of arrogance. We seek not dominion, but connection. At the council table, Idris nodded. We are not the architects of perfection, only stewards of our fate. Caleb leaned in, the glint of determination flickering. Set a course for the Trinex worlds. There's a relay port, untouched, waiting for word from us. waiting for proof that the Great Collapse is not the end. Sarai, along with Ada and June, set the navigation. The vessel's engines summoned a low, rising hum, a song of departure. Panels flickered to life, and every station hummed with anticipation rather than dread. As the slingshot calculations resolved, arcane threads of math and hope coiling together, they watched the infinite night draw close, then recede as the vessel accelerated along its new trajectory. Constellations blurred, stars bent, and the survivors left behind not just the carnage of the rebellion, but the shackles of unchecked ambition. In the days that followed, the crew began anew. Idris piloted, always alert for the faint shimmer of authority ships on the distant horizon. The bridge had transformed, no longer a battleground, but a sanctuary bathed in the soft glow of rewiring and hope. Here, memories of Eris's sacrifice lingered. Idris often found himself fixing his gaze where she'd once stood, a quiet promise shaping in his heart. To remember. Over these days, Miri coaxed the ship's battered systems to whir again. She scavenged memories of their journey as she worked, the voices lost in static, the codes she'd cracked with trembling hands. In private moments, she studied the artifact they had nearly died for, now sealed within a containment chamber possessing a serenity it had never known. Its pale light flickered, echoing dormant possibilities. The future, she thought, could be rewired. Ko built a small memorial in the shadowed alcove near engineering, a quiet tribute marked by tokens from every fallen comrade. He spoke less now, words spent in silent prayers beneath drive panel glimmer. But his gaze, always steady, revealed a new resolve. The rebellion had torn away his faith in leaders, but stitched a fiercer loyalty. To friends, to those who fight because they must. News trickled in from the outer systems. They'd done it. The Circle of Suns would not rebuild, not so soon. Old alliances shifted, wary but watching. The rebellion, once a wild torrent, faded into scattered cells, rumor and myth. Authorities, bruised but still standing, opened narrow corridors for pardons and promises. The survivors could choose now, run, return, or reforge. Vesper met them by the viewing port one cold morning, soft nebulae curling like fog beyond the glass. Her hands trembled as she closed the loop on her own past, this time not in anger, but gratitude. "We could disappear," she said, voice low. "Or we could build something better. The universe is vast." And so, together, the crew charted a course, not for glory, not for revenge, but for the hope that their scars, new and old, might mark the boundary between ambition and compassion. Idris set the coordinates, Miri gave the engine one last blessing, and Ko secured the last bolt. As the ship slid into warp, Eris's memory lingered in the hush. Not forgotten, but woven into the future, an echo beneath every star they crossed. The artifact pulsed, quiet, now a symbol of hope and warning. A message entrusted not only to them, but to whatever worlds might share their path. The surviving crew gathered in the observation chamber. The artifact secured in its containment field, its subtle glow reflecting in the darkness. Captain Mara stood at the viewport, her reflection superimposed against the streaming cosmos. The edge of loss and discovery pressed equally upon her heart. Below, Theo ran his hand along the transparent casing. "Do you think it will ever be silent?" he asked quietly. Mara shook her head. "It's never meant to be silent, Theo. It's a beacon, a reminder of what we risk and what we still must learn." Caden stepped forward. "We chart new coordinates at dawn. There are orders from High Command to bring the artifact to Lyra Prime. They've prepared the isolation vaults." Val, exhausted but resolute, met Mara's gaze. "We fulfilled our promise to Eris, but what happens next?" "We carry on," Mara answered. "As explorers, as guardians." The ship drifted in the velvet lanes of warp. Somewhere behind them, the shattered moon of Xylan drifted, a wound in the night, but also a birthmark for what might come. The artifact's pulse synced with the starfield now, like a heart learning the rhythm of distant worlds. In quarters, each crew member tended their own scars. The small rituals for living endured, Caden tuning his data crystal, Val recording observations, Theo leafing through Eris's notes, Mara sketching orbital maps. And through it all, Eris's voice remained, woven in memory and the quiet hum of the drives. The horizon beckoned, the next rendezvous, the next unknown. The possibility that they were no longer alone, that across the galaxy, others sought, struggled, risked, and sometimes fell, so that the story would continue. On the bridge, Mara initiated final protocols. Crew assembled, eyes bright with exhaustion and with something more, faith in each other, and in the universe's infinite, confounding depth. The ship leapt, starlight streaming over the hull. At its heart, the artifact glowed. Behind them, the past its sorrow and strength. Ahead, worlds uncharted. Mara whispered the old blessing, meant for those who dared the dark, and the ship, whole again, sailed for morning.